to the Remark Support Monthly Webinar Series. My name is Nora Pechkovsky, and I'm the Product Manager for the Remark software, and I'll be your moderator for today. The topic today is a quick start guide to creating a web survey in Remark Web Survey Professional. We'll provide an overview of Remark Web Survey as an introduction to using the software, and we've geared this webinar to new users as well as prospective Remark Office OMR users who might be interested in learning more about web surveys. Our presenter for today is Product Analyst Kate Lindstrom. So before we get started, just a few housekeeping details to cover. The webinar will run between a half an hour to an hour. The presentation will be available for download within a few days. We'll send you a link to that. Your phone lines are muted. However, we will take questions using the live meeting Q&A panel. To ask a question, just click the Q&A menu at the top of the window, type your question, and then click Ask. To minimize the Q&A window, click anywhere on the menu bar. You can type your questions during the webinar, but in addition, we'll take a short pause at the end of the presentation to allow you to type your questions so that you can remain focused on the presentation itself. We'll read as many questions as possible at the end. And finally, we recommend pressing the F5 key on your keyboard to view the presentation in full screen mode. So now I'll turn it over to Kate to provide you with an introduction to Remark Web Survey.
Hello, this is Kate Lindstrom. I'm hoping I might have spoken with some of you all on the phone in the past. Welcome to today's webinar on Remark Web Survey Professional. Today we'll be looking at an overview of the product. We'll take a look at its components as well as its uses. We are also going to take a look at creating a new survey and adding and changing elements on an existing survey. This webinar is geared to new users and prospective users of Remark Web Survey. I'd like to extend a special welcome to our Remark Office OMR users who are with us today. There's a number of you, and we will welcome any questions that you may have as we go through our presentation. And as Nora said, we will have a Q&A session at the end of the presentation. So what is Remark Web Survey Professional? It is, in a nutshell, a web form design program that will allow you to create web forms without needing to know HTML. The software runs on your own PC as well as on a web server, and it gives you complete control over creating, distributing your web forms, as well as collecting your data. It's very simple to use. The first step involved with web survey would be creating a Remark Web Survey form either from scratch or converting a Remark Office OMR template into a Remark Web Survey web form. You could then modify the web form until it meets your desired needs and has the look and feel that you want your web form to have. You would then publish your form on your web server, and then you would collect the data that your respondents submitted to the server. As with Remark Office OMR, you can analyze the data in Remark QuickStats, or you have the option to export the data to the analysis package of your choice. To kind of break down the product a little further, I'd like to mention, like I said before, it is composed of two main parts. The designer software, which is installed on your local PC, as well as the server software, which would be installed on the web server of your choice. The designer software is where the web forms are created, edited, and where the data from the respondents is eventually viewed. The server software handles the input your respondents reply to the published web forms. It is where the data would be originally collected and stored. Today we're going to be focusing on the web form design, and we will not be covering the publishing of the forms or the collection of the data. A special note to our Remark Office OMR users, web form data can be combined with Remark Office OMR data. In fact, existing Remark Office templates can be converted into web forms and published. This would allow you to collect the same data on paper and online. Web-based and paper-based data could be combined and analyzed together, and reports could be generated on the entire data set. That's an overview of Remark Web Survey. Let's take a look a little bit more at how a web form would be built. Now, the components of a web form are kind of like building blocks. These elements are in a hierarchical format, with a web form's pages being at the highest level. Pages would then contain sections, and sections, in turn, are composed of elements such as labels, lines, buttons, and questions. And a question, for example, would have a sub-element called an answer. But first, if we take a look at the pages, a form can have one or many pages, and there are several types of pages. A standard page would contain additional components, like we mentioned, such as sections, which would have questions that we'll discuss more. There's also a number of special pages you could incorporate on your web form. An example of an optional special page would be a login page. A login page would become the first page that your respondents would see when they access your web form, and that would allow them to enter your web form via a password that you could provide to them. There's also the idea of a web form complete page, and that would become the last page that your respondents would see on the web form. Every survey actually has at least one web form complete page. This is a page that you could either customize yourself, or you could also choose to use this page to redirect your respondents either to another page or another website. Some other optional pages on a web form would include a session pause page. This page would let your respondents sort of bookmark or save their location within a web form to allow them to easily come back to that spot and complete that form at a different time. There's also the idea of a response confirmation page. And this page, if you would choose to use it, would display just before the web form complete page. This page will give your respondents an opportunity to review any of the questions that they've answered on the form and also change their responses to questions at that point if they would choose to do so. They could even print that page at that time as a record of their submission. Now, after pages are sections. Pages are composed of sections, and a section contains, for example, question collections, as well as label elements, which would be text or lines, even multimedia. Sections also can be used for formatting, the look of your form. So, for example, one section you could choose to have 3 or even 5 or more columns in a section for the look of a certain question, and then you could insert a section right after that that only had 1 or 2 columns in it. Pages obviously can contain multiple numbers of sections. Navigation buttons, for example, are also stored in sections, and we'll talk about those more later as well. Questions of a form would be entered into a section. Different question types would include option buttons, text box entry questions, checkbox questions, as well as question tables. We'll spend a little more time on creating questions and handling the options that you have available within questions when we get to the web survey application itself. Questions obviously have a subcomponent called answers, and they have their own attributes that we're going to take a look at as well. And then finally, as we mentioned, buttons are a component of sections, and they'll allow for navigation within the form. So let's take this time and move to the web survey application. I'd like to just take a minute and just go over some of the elements here on the actual form. This is a launched Remark Web Survey, and I do happen to have one form open already. But let's start with the application button up here in the upper left-hand corner, this globe. I'm going to click on it to select it, and you can see that there's common functions listed here under the application button. You could open a new form, create a new form. Whoops, accidentally opened a form there. Go back in. Create a new form, open a form. You see this option here for conversion. This is right here an opportunity if you wanted to convert a Remark Office OMR template file into a web form. You can also see on the right-hand side of this little pop-up window a convenient listing of recently opened web forms. Down here at the bottom of this window, you see that I have web survey options. I'm going to select that now. In this window, you can define some basic settings for your web survey application so that every time you open a new form, it can inherit some of these settings, and you wouldn't have to enter this information every time you created a new form. I want to point out here under Resources, and again, this is for our Remark Office users who might be with us today. This is an easy place to look and double-check your serial number, your exact version of the product, right here, authentication code and that type of thing. Also right here under Documentation, this is where you would access the user's guide or other documentation that's provided with Remark Web Survey in PDF format. I'm going to cancel out of this window and just point out up here our quick access toolbar. This just provides shortcuts to commonly used functions within Web Survey, and it can be customized for you. Right under the quick access toolbar, you see the ribbon. This ribbon is the navigation bar. Across the top, it contains menu options for using the features in Remark Web Survey. You can see that it's organized, hopefully you can see it's organized by tabs here, where controls are grouped together based on the functionality. You would click the tab at the top of the ribbon to access the functions available under that tab. You can see that my ribbon was minimized, and when I clicked the tab, it opened the ribbon up. You can choose if you want, I'm going to right-click inside here, you can choose to leave that ribbon maximized if you prefer, or if you would choose to minimize the ribbon, it would open up for you when you selected one of the functions there. Moving on, you can see the main section of Remark Web Survey is sort of split into two. On the left side is our tree view, and on the right side is our HTML preview. The left side here of the design window provides a tree view that displays the various parts of the web form in a tree format, and you can see, I'm going to expand this little caret here next to page, you can see some of the elements we talked about earlier, the building blocks of the web form. So we have some sections, this little stick pin is a label, this little book with a question mark is a question. If I expand down that question, you can see these little icons represent answers, again in hierarchical format. These parts of the tree are called elements, and in this window you can access your form elements, add, delete, and modify what you want in your web form. As I move through this presentation, you'll notice that I personally do tend to navigate in the tree view of Remark Web Survey to make modifications to my form. So I personally choose to leave this minimized, but you can, any of these features I'm accessing in the tree view, you can also access here on the ribbon as well. The HTML preview is a preview of what the form will look like to your respondents as they access your form from their own personal web browsers. And this view is automatically updated as you modify or change your form. You also see up here, here's only one tab open, but this is indicating for us what web form or forms are currently open in the designer. Let's go ahead and open a new form, and we'll see a new tab appear here. So I've gone to open a new form. I'm not going to choose to title it right now, but I could. Here's where the title would be. I can decide how many standard pages I have and any special pages that I may want to include. Any decisions I make here with regard to the web form can be changed at a later time. So if I, for example, include a login page and then later decide I do not want a login page, it's very straightforward to go delete the login page. So there's no decision being made here that binds me to it later on. I'm just going to say OK right here. And you can see then that this form that I just opened has the tab moving to the forefront. So this is now the active web form tab. And I have a default page. I said I had one page when I opened that, and some sections here. Let me go ahead and insert a page just to show you how easy that is. I'm going to click on page 1, and now I'm going to right-click, and I have the opportunity to insert a page, and I'm going to insert a standard page here and say OK. And so now you see I have 2 pages here. I'm also just going to show you how easy it is to insert a question. Now remember, questions fall under sections. So I'm going to first select the section where I want to insert the question. And again, I'm going to right-click and choose to insert a question. You can see at this point I could insert a standard question or a question table. I'm just going to insert a question here to show you the interface. The question type, I'm going to just collect a name. So I'll just say that this is a text box, data type textual. I'll give it a field name of name. And I'll put in my question text. Now you can see here the option to enable rich text formatting. If I do so right now, you can see that rich text options appear for me. I think I will take advantage of that, and I'm going to just bold this and maybe make it a little larger. You can see I can give it a color or change the font as well. And so I've entered the text of my question, and let me just say OK and take a look and see how that looks. Once I've created a question, I can go back at any time and make modifications to it. So let me do that now. I'm going to right-click on the question element and take a look at the properties here. This returns me back to the window where I just was. I think what I'll do here is I'm going to choose to make the answer box a little larger, and I can adjust that right here in the question property attributes. I'll make that a 10 here and say OK. And you can see that, again, that HTML preview is dynamically updated for me.
For a name?
At this point, I'd like to move on to the existing form that I have open and make some modifications to that. So I'm just going to click on this tab here. So that form I had open earlier is right here for me. You can see the tree view. I'm going to just click on this arrow and collapse that tree view and take a look at it. So you can see I have page 1 selected. So my HTML preview, I'm looking at page 1 in just the way that my respondents would be seeing page 1 on my form. I think what I'd like to do, that looks a little plain to me. I think what I'm going to do is take advantage of the header here for the web form. And a header for a web form is very similar to a header as you might think of it in Microsoft Word, header and footer. If you enter something in a header in Word, you can choose then to have that header information displayed on all the pages in your Microsoft Word form. Similar for Remark Web Survey. For this header, I think I'm going to just right-click here, and I think I'd like to insert a logo, an image. I now have an image property window open. I'm going to click here to actually navigate out and select an image that I'd like to use here. I'll use a Gravic logo. Say OK. I'm viewing the logo here. You can see that I can adjust the size of the logo prior to bringing it into the web form. I think I'm going to leave it as it is and just say OK, and let's see how that looks. That's how it would look in the header. I'm going to go to page 1, and so now it's going to be on all the pages of my form, and I think I like how that looks. I'm going to leave that there. Again, looking at my page 1 of my form, the premise of this particular form is that it's an exit survey for recent graduates. And I'm realizing that I forgot to add a question that I wanted to include on the form. In fact, I want it to be the very first question on my form. I want to confirm with the respondents whether or not they graduated, whether or not they in fact graduated. So I'm going to expand here my page 1 to take a look at my view of page 1 in the tree section. And I'm going to click on the label, which is called My First Major, and I'm going to insert before that label, I'm going to right-click and say Insert Before. I'm going to insert a question here, just a standard question. So here's my question interface. And what I want to do is I want to ask if this individual has graduated. So my question type is going to be an option button. And I'm going to call the field name graduate. And my text, I'm going to just say, did you graduate? Whoops. Did you graduate this spring? I am going to take advantage of rich text formatting and make that a little bigger so I can't miss it. And let me now go, I set up the question, let me now go to the answer section here of the question properties and take a look at what answer options I want to use. I'm going to look here at the predefined answer scales to see if there's one that might already exist that I want to use. So I'm going to click this drop-down arrow, and I can scroll down and find that there's quite a lot of choices. I see no, yes, but I think I want to use yes, no, so I'm going to choose this option here. And this is what will display in my HTML display, and then my background labels. That looks good. I think I'm going to go down here also to the attributes, and I am going to choose to make this question required. So I've just hovered over this checkbox, so it gives me a little hint on making a question required. Select this option to require a response to this question from the respondent. I will select that, and you can see that this missing error message became active. So if I click here, what I can show you is if someone chooses not to mark a required question, they will have a handy reminder. I'm going to click on here, and their reminder will say a response is required for this question. I could choose to customize the missing error message that they received and say, please respond to this question, or, whatever I wanted. This is something you can do on an individual question basis, is sort of customize the error message. I'm just going to say OK here for now. And just to show you, since I am creating a question as well, just the analysis end of things. Typically, when you're setting up a survey, you taking a look at the analysis, many times the default settings that are set up here, which is to include a question and in the grading process if it's a test, or include a tabulation, put the question in tabulation process if it's a survey, are defaulted to on. So a lot of this information will not need to be changed, and I, in fact, am going to accept the defaults here. I'm going to say OK, and this will take me back, and I'm going to see now in my HTML preview that I have inserted this question. I'll point out to you that in the tree view, you'll see that the lettering of the question is red. That indicates to me that it's a required question. I can tell that at a glance from the tree view. So I think I'll leave that as it is. I'm going to minimize page 1, and I'm going to take a look now at page 2 of my form. This page just has one question, and what I wanted to show you in page 2 is the idea that images can be used as question answers in a form. So let me expand here, page 2, and I want to show you 2 ways to look at the answer properties for a question. One way is to select the actual question. I can right-click, select properties.
You answered no in that first
And I have this question properties window that may look familiar. This is the same window that appeared when I inserted the question on page 1. And if I go now to answers, I see the display here of the answers. We don't see the images yet. If I select a specific answer and access that specific answer's properties, which I'm going to do by clicking here now, you can see that this is where I would import an image for that particular answer. I'm going to say OK to this window and point out that for any given question, you do have a handy feature, which is the ability to randomize your answer choices during the display. So for this logo selection, I am going to choose to randomize those answer choices so that we don't skew our responses too much. I'm going to say OK here. Now the second way I wanted to just show you how to go to an answer property is you can see that I have this question expanded down to see each individual answer. So just like I accessed the properties for a question, I can also select an answer, right-click, and then go into the properties of an individual answer, which I'm going to do now. And you can see right here is where we were before. Again, we're just accessing that information one step lower in the hierarchical view. I'm just going to cancel here. So we've right now handled straightforward questions. What I'd also like to do is talk a minute about a question table. And to do that, I'm going to return to page 1 and scroll down a little bit at some of the questions that I have here on page 1. I'm going to as well extend the tree view here on the left to show you what page 1 is composed of. So what you can see here on page 1 is that I have a number of questions with the same answer choices: accessibility of faculty, quality of teaching, access to classes and major, level of preparation, and overall learning experience. Because this group of questions has the same answer choices, it might make sense for me to actually, instead of list those questions individually, put them in a table. I've already made my web form, but this is actually an easy modification to make. And I'm just going to show you how to do that quickly here. I'm going to press the Shift key on my keyboard and select each of these individual questions that have the same answer choices. Hopefully on your view, you can see that these all have a light blue background to show that they're all selected at the same time. I'm still holding down the Shift key, and I'm now going to right-click into this space to bring up that by now familiar window that lets me access the properties. But another choice here you can see is to place questions in a table. I'm going to select that right now. And as you can see, all those questions were now placed for me in a question table. Now, although they were placed in a question table for me, I don't really like myself how the questions themselves are wrapped. I'd like for the questions to have a little more space on the form view, and that's an easy thing to change. So you can see that my blue questions turned into a green question table. I'm going to right-click on the question table to select everything at one time, and I'm going to go and look at the properties here. I'm also going to point out if I had changed my mind, it would be very easy to extract the questions from the table as well. Let me go into the properties and go into the format of my table, which is this button in the lower left corner. And part of my reason going in here is I do want to show you the vast number of options you have for formatting a question table. There's colors, fonts, bolding, lines. There's a lot of information in here that's available for you to get the look of your form just the way you want it. I happen to know that what I want to adjust is the question column width because I want to give the question a wider column. So I'm going to click in this cell and I'm going to give the value which translates into a percentage of the screen. I think I'm going to say that my question, I want to give it 40% of that screen space. That's the first step to making the change I want. The second step is right underneath here. Do I want question column widths enabled? It's defaulted to false, but I want to set that to true. So I'm going to make that change. That's the only change I'll make at this time. I want to see how it looks. So I'm going to say OK, and then OK again. And there it's changed the formatting in my question table. I'm happy with how that looks, so I'm going to leave that as it is now. I'm going to now just minimize page 1. Page 2 was our images. Let's take a look at page 3 to see if there's any changes that I might want to make here. This page only has one question where I'm asking the respondents to indicate their primary activity this fall. I think what I'd like to do is actually restructure this question a little bit because I've gotten some feedback that my respondents have a number of different activities. It was difficult for them to just choose one. So I'm going to, again, right-click in the question box here and take a look at properties. And I'm going to change my wording. I'm going to say, please indicate the item you would consider to be your main activity this fall, because the other thing I'm going to do is I'm going to change my question type as well. Instead of having this an option button, I think I'm going to change this to a checkbox. I'm just going to say OK here to show you how that change took place in my form. Now that I've set this up as a checkbox, my respondents can choose more than one item. Now I'm going to, again, right-click in here to go in Properties. And under Answers, I want to point out that I can limit the number of answers, and I am going to do that. I'm going to let my respondents choose 2. I think that's enough for them to choose as far as their major activity this fall. And let me just say OK here. The other thing I want to point out, now this feature I'm going to show you is available for both option buttons and checkboxes. But one of my choices here is an other choice. And rather than have a respondent just respond other and may not have any additional information for that choice, I'm going to try to collect some more information for any of my respondents who might choose other. So what I'm going to do is I can go right here to my other option, right-click to get to the properties of that. And you can see that I have, under the attributes, I have the ability to append a text box area to this answer, which is what I'm going to do. Now this defaulted to have the second checkbox selected, which is actually also what I want, and that is to treat the appended item's answer as a separate question with another field name. That way, if they do reply, I have collected that information as a separate column in my data. One thing I am going to do here, I have the ability to have that appended text box area to have a default value. So I'm going to put a default value of please specify as a reminder for anyone who might choose that option to go ahead and enter what value they'd like in there. I'm going to say OK here, and I'd like to see how that looks on my form. That's exactly what I wanted, so if someone does select the other, they'll know that I'd like for them to specify their reply. Okay. Let's go to our fourth and final page of our survey and take a look at that page to see if there's any changes we want. Looking at the last page of my survey, I realized I've, again, forgotten a question. I had intended to have some some overall information to capture from the respondent. So I'm going to go ahead and enter my question now. I'm going to, actually I think what I want to do is put in the question table. So let me go ahead and insert, so I'm going to select my label here. I'm going to right-click on my label. And I have the option, now that I want to insert another question, I can insert it after my question label, or I can insert it before my question label. I think this one I want to insert after my question label. And I am going to insert a question, and at this point choose a question table. So here's my question table properties. So now I'm going to put in a question table. The first thing I need to do is insert some rows which are going to contain the actual questions. So I'm going to say insert row here, and you can see, as with a standard question, I do have rich text formatting available. I'm going to collect, I have 3 questions for my question table. I'm going to ask about faculty accessibility, say okay. I'll insert another question here. I'm going to ask about modern facilities. My final question in my table, I'm going to be asking about use of technology. Okay, so all I've done so far is insert questions. Now I need to provide some answer selections for my respondents. To do that, I just need to insert my answer group column. So I'm going to click on that here. And this question type, I'm going to choose to be an option button, data type textual. Here, this header text, I don't have to put information here, but I am going to choose to. And it will be sort of a label for my question's answers. I'm going to say, please rate the following areas. And I think I'll go ahead and bold that. So now I'm still setting up the answers. I've set up a label for the answers. Now I'm going to go to the actual answers, going right here. And as before with my yes-no question, I suspect there might be a predefined scale that I want to use. If there was not a scale that I found that I wanted to use, I could always just click in this cell here and type the value or values that I wanted. I'm going to just choose excellent to poor and say OK here. And I'm going to say OK and take a look and see how my table looks. Looks fine. That's just what I wanted. That was the question I forgot to add on page 4. So now I've gone through all the standard pages of my survey. I'm going to take a look at the 2 special pages that I have. The first special page I have is the login page. Now, while using a login password might not be a basic use of Remark Web Survey, many of our customers do like to use that feature. So I am going to spend a minute and show you how you could set up your login information. So I'm going to, just to show you what we have here, I'm going to expand the login page, and I'm going to click at the page level, right-click, and take a look at my properties here. And what I would like to do is to add some passwords to my login page, and I do that at the page level. So I'm going to click here, my password list builder, and this space is where you would enter your passwords, respondents, and email addresses if you wanted them. You could choose to type in the information here yourself. You could choose to have the Remark Web Survey application generate passwords for you. Or a third option is if you already have that information somewhere in a spreadsheet or a database, you can pull it in to the Remark Web Survey web form with a database connection that I'm just going to step through quickly here. Database connection settings. I have an Excel spreadsheet that has a few passwords in there that I wanted to use. So I'm choosing first the type, and then I'm going to click the folder to navigate out to the location of my password. This is actually not the file I wanted. I'm going to navigate out to the file that I need.
She's pulling in password file she has.
Well, sorry for all these steps here. This is the password list that I wanted. As you can see, Remark Web Survey can connect through a network, no problem. I'm going to test this connection. Okay. I'm going to say okay. All this did was set up the link to the password. I haven't pulled them in yet. And I think I'm going to go out here and say, I'm going to tell Remark Web Survey which column I want to use as the password. And I am going to bring in the name as well as the email value. So I've set that mapping up. Now all I have to do is import that information. And it's just pulled in the information that I had on that spreadsheet. I just say OK here and OK again. If at a later time I lose the connection to that database, that's no problem. The login page already now has that information available for the web survey, program. The last special page we're going to look at today is the web form complete page. And as you recall, every web form will have a web form complete page. As I click on it here, what I see is just the header. So this is what my respondents would see. What I'm going to do is right-click now on that page and take a look at the properties. And I think what I'd like to do for my respondents is when they complete my web form, I'm actually going to redirect them to another website. I'm going to send them to the Gravic website.
Just when they complete it, they go to the Gravic website? Okay.
And that way, when they complete the form, they would go to the Gravic website. Oh, let me just double check. It looks like I couldn't get to that. So again, that HTML preview is very handy. It shows what your users would see from their browser. I misspelled my website, so I caught that right away before even publishing my form. Let me try again. There we go. So now I know that this is what my respondents will see when they're done with my form. Now there's one more thing I'd like to cover with you all this afternoon, and that is the ability of Remark Web Survey to handle branching within a form. To do that, I'm going to go back up to our first page in our survey, and I'm going to select at the page level the properties of this page and take a look at the branching that I can do here. Every page obviously has this interface. You could set up branching on any page. I happen to be choosing page 1. And what I'd like to do is, if someone is responding to my survey, yet they're not actually a graduate, I don't want to solicit their input on the rest of the survey. What I'm going to do is, from this branching criteria builder, I can select any question in my survey. And this is the way you would want to do it. If you did plan on doing branching, you would want to do it after you had created your entire survey, so that you have your layout exactly as it's going to be. So I'm going to choose this question, which I also know is a required question. There's no possibility that someone will slip by me on this. Did I graduate this spring? And as we're talking, I'm clicking in these cells. I'm going to say if their response is equal to no, then because I don't want them to take the rest of the survey, I am going to tell them to go to, and then here I have available to me any page on my form. So if they responded no, that they didn't graduate this spring, I'm going to send them to the web form complete page and jump them past the rest of the survey. I should mention that you can have more than one web form complete page. So if I wanted to, I could have created a separate web form complete page that only non-graduates would see that would say, I'm sorry, we're not going to be surveying you at this time. We will survey you in the fall, something like that. So I'm going to send them to the web form complete page. And if I show you down here in this criteria translation and also at the end, if someone did respond yes, I don't have to specify where they go. They will, by default, simply go to the next page in the sequence. I'm going to say OK here, knowing that those who did graduate will be able to take the survey as I intended. So this part of going through editing a web survey sums up the presentation for today. We're going to take a short break to allow you the opportunity to formulate any questions that you may have.
Okay, great. Thank you, Kate. As Kate said, we are going to take a little bit of a break right now. The presentation portion is complete.